I stared at my granddaughter, my eyes wide with shock and disappointment. She was only 12 years old, but her words cut deep. I thought back to the day she was born, and how I had promised to be there for her. But life had taken a different turn, and her parents had abandoned her. I had taken her in, raised her as my own, and provided for her every need. I had sacrificed my own happiness, my own well-being, for her sake. And this was how she repaid me? "I'll take the money, Grandma," she said, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural intensity. I felt a shiver run down my spine as she continued, "You can't afford to raise me, but you can afford to hoard $90,000, I was taken aback by her words. Where had she learned to speak like that? And what did she mean by $90,000? I had indeed saved some money over the years, but it was for her future, for her education, for her well-being. But she didn't care about any of that. All she cared about was getting her hands on my money. "I want it now," she shouted, her face red with rage. I was shocked by her behavior, by her lack of gratitude. Didn't she know that I had given her everything? I tried to reason with her, to explain that the money was for her future, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept shouting, kept demanding that I give her the money. I was at a loss for what to do. I had never seen her behave like this before. I didn't know how to react, how to calm her down. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the storm passed. She stopped shouting, stopped demanding. She just looked at me, her eyes cold and hard. "I'll get it eventually," she said, her voice dripping with malice. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me feeling shaken and disturbed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to deal with this new, angry, demanding granddaughter of mine. I only knew that I had to protect myself and my money. But how? And from whom? I had thought that I was safe, that I was protected. But now, I wasn't so sure. As I sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, I heard a knock at the door. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. "Hello, dear," she said, her voice warm and friendly. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." I hesitated, unsure of what to say. But then, I decided to tell her everything. Maybe she could help me, maybe she could offer some advice. "Come in," I said, gesturing for her to enter. "I need to talk to someone." I poured Mrs. Johnson a cup of tea and sat down next to her, trying to gather my thoughts. "It's just, I don't know what's going on with my granddaughter," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "She's been acting so strange lately. She's become so demanding and angry, and I don't know how to deal with it." Mrs. Johnson listened attentively, her expression sympathetic. "Tell me more," she said, her voice gentle. I took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the past few days. I told her about my granddaughter's constant demands for money, about her tantrums and outbursts, and about the way she seemed to be manipulating me. I told her about the latest incident, about the way my granddaughter had shouted at me and demanded that I give her the $90,000. Mrs. Johnson listened attentively, her expression growing more and more concerned. When I finished speaking, she sat in silence for a moment, collecting her thoughts. "I think I know what might be going on," she said finally. "I've seen this kind of behavior before, and it's not just about the money. It's about control." "Control?" I repeated, feeling a surge of confusion. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Johnson leaned forward, her eyes serious. "Your granddaughter is trying to assert her power over you," she said. "She's trying to make you do what she wants, and she's using the money as a way to manipulate you." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the truth of Mrs. Johnson's words. My granddaughter was indeed trying to control me, and it was a frightening thought. But what could I do? I couldn't just give in to her demands, could I? I had to stand up for myself, but I didn't know how. Mrs. Johnson seemed to sense my uncertainty. "You need to set boundaries," she said firmly. "You need to make it clear to your granddaughter that you won't be manipulated or controlled." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. I would do whatever it took to protect myself and my money. I would set boundaries, and I would stand up for myself. But as I stood up to thank Mrs. Johnson, I heard a noise coming from the living room. It was my granddaughter, and she was on the phone. I felt a surge of unease as I realized who she might be talking to. Was it her parents, perhaps? Or was it someone else entirely? I tried to listen in, but my granddaughter was speaking in a hushed tone. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but I could tell that she was being secretive. Mrs. Johnson seemed to sense my unease. "I think I'll get going," she said, standing up. "But remember, you need to set those boundaries. You can't let your granddaughter walk all over you." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude towards Mrs. Johnson. She had given me some valuable advice, and I was determined to follow it. As Mrs. Johnson left, I turned my attention back to my granddaughter. She was still on the phone, and she was still speaking in a hushed tone. I felt a surge of anger as I realized that she was probably plotting something. She was probably talking to someone about me, about my money, and about how she could get her hands on it. I decided to confront her. I walked into the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who are you talking to?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. My granddaughter looked up, a guilty expression on her face. "Just a friend," she said, trying to cover. But I wasn't buying it. I knew that she was lying, and I knew that she was up to something. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice firm. "What are you plotting?" My granddaughter looked up at me, a defiant glint in her eye. "You'll find out soon enough," she said, her voice dripping with malice. And with that, she hung up the phone and walked out of the room, leaving me feeling shaken and disturbed. What was she planning? And how could I stop her? I was left standing in the living room, feeling frustrated and worried. What was my granddaughter planning, and how could I stop her? I tried to think back to our previous conversations, to see if there was anything that could give me a clue. But she had been so secretive, so evasive, that I had no idea what she was thinking. I decided to do some investigating of my own. I went into the kitchen and started searching through my granddaughter's things, looking for any clues that might tell me what she was up to. I checked her backpack, her phone, and her computer, but I couldn't find anything that seemed out of the ordinary. Just as I was about to give up, I heard a noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone was knocking on the door. I got up to answer it, wondering who it could be. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see a young woman standing there. She was dressed in a business suit and looked like she meant business. "Can I help you?" I asked, feeling a sense of unease. "Yes," the woman replied. "My name is Miss Smith, and I'm a social worker. I'm here to talk to you about your granddaughter." I felt a surge of alarm at this. What did a social worker want with my granddaughter? I invited Miss Smith in, and she sat down in the living room. "What's this about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Miss Smith hesitated before speaking. "We've had some concerns about your granddaughter's well-being," she said. "We've received reports that she's been acting strangely, that she's been making demands and throwing tantrums." I felt a sense of anger at this. Who was making these reports, and why were they interfering in my family's business? But Miss Smith continued, her voice firm. "We're worried that your granddaughter might be in danger," she said. "We're worried that she might be being manipulated or coerced in some way." I felt a chill run down my spine at this. Manipulated or coerced? What did Miss Smith mean? And who was behind it? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to play it cool. But Miss Smith just looked at me, her eyes piercing. "Don't play dumb," she said. "We know that your granddaughter has been acting strangely. We know that she's been making demands and throwing tantrums. And we know that she's been talking to someone on the phone, someone who might be influencing her behavior." I felt a surge of fear at this. Who was my granddaughter talking to, and what were they saying to her? I tried to think back to the phone call I had overheard, but I couldn't remember anything that might give me a clue. "What do you want from me?" I asked, feeling a sense of desperation. Miss Smith leaned forward, her eyes intense. "We want to help your granddaughter," she said. We want to make sure that she's safe and that she's not being manipulated or coerced in any way. But we need your cooperation. I felt a sense of uncertainty at this. Could I trust Ms. Smith, or was she just trying to get something from me? I didn't know what to do, but I knew that I had to make a decision. Okay, I said finally. I'll cooperate. But I want to know what's going on. I want to know who's behind this and what they're trying to do to my granddaughter. Ms. Smith nodded, a small smile on her face. We'll get to the bottom of this, she said. But we need to be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with, and we don't know what might happen if we confront the wrong people. I felt a sense of fear at this. What were we dealing with, and what might happen if we confronted the wrong people? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. I was determined to protect my granddaughter, no matter what it took. Miss Smith pulled out a small notebook and began to flip through the pages, her eyes scanning the notes she had written. From what we've gathered, your granddaughter has been making contact with someone who is influencing her behavior, she said. We're not sure who this person is, but we have reason to believe that they may be using some kind of manipulation or coercion to get her to do their bidding. I felt a surge of anger at this. Who was this person, and how were they managing to manipulate my granddaughter? I wanted to know more, but Miss Smith just shook her head. We're still investigating, she said. But we need your help to get to the bottom of this. Can you tell me more about your granddaughter's behavior? Has she been acting strangely or erratically? I thought back to the past few days, trying to remember anything that might be relevant. She's been making demands for money, I said. And she's been getting angry and aggressive when I don't give it to her. But that's not like her. She's always been a sweet and gentle child. Miss Smith nodded, her eyes serious. This is consistent with what we've seen in other cases, she said. The person behind this is using some kind of psychological manipulation to get your granddaughter to do their bidding. We need to be careful, because this person may be more powerful than we think. I felt a chill run down my spine at this. More powerful than we think? What did Ms. Smith mean? And who was this person, anyway? I had so many questions, but Miss Smith just shook her head. We'll get to the bottom of this, she said. But for now, we need to focus on keeping your granddaughter safe. Can you tell me more about her daily routine? Where does she go, and who does she talk to? I thought back to my granddaughter's daily routine, trying to remember anything that might be relevant. She goes to school, of course, I said. And she talks to her friends. But she's also been spending a lot of time on the phone, talking to someone. I don't know who it is, but I've seen her getting angry and upset when she's on the phone. Miss Smith nodded, her eyes serious. This is consistent with what we've seen in other cases, she said. The person behind this is using the phone to manipulate your granddaughter, to get her to do their bidding. We need to be careful, because this person may be more powerful than we think. I felt a surge of fear at this. What was going on, and how could I protect my granddaughter? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. I was determined to do whatever it took to keep my granddaughter safe. Miss Smith stood up, her eyes serious. I'm going to need to take a look at your granddaughter's phone records, she said. Can you get those for me? I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. Finally, we were getting somewhere. Finally, we were going to get to the bottom of this. I got up and went to get the phone records, my heart pounding in my chest. What would we find out? And what would happen next? I didn't know, but I was determined to find out. As I handed the phone records to Ms. Smith, I felt a sense of trepidation. What were we going to discover? And how would it affect my granddaughter? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. Ms. Smith began to scan the phone records, her eyes scanning the pages. And then, suddenly, she stopped. She looked up at me, her eyes serious. We have a problem, she said. Your granddaughter has been making contact with a number that is registered to a shell company. We don't know who is behind this company, but we do know that it's not good. I felt a surge of fear at this. What did it mean? And what was going to happen next? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. Miss Smith's words hung in the air, and I felt a sense of unease wash over me. A shell company? What did that even mean? And who was behind it? I looked at Miss Smith, hoping for some answers, but she just shook her head. "We'll need to investigate further," she said. "But I have to warn you, this could be serious. If your granddaughter is involved with a shell company, it's possible that she's in over her head." I felt a surge of fear at this. Over her head? What did that mean? And what kind of danger was my granddaughter in? I thought back to the past few days, trying to remember anything that might be relevant. The demands for money, the tantrums, the strange phone calls, it all seemed to be connected to this shell company. But how? And why? I looked at Miss Smith, hoping for some answers, but she just shook her head. "We'll need to get to the bottom of this," she said. "But I have to warn you, it's not going to be easy. We'll need to tread carefully, and we'll need to be prepared for anything." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. I was going to protect my granddaughter, no matter what. Miss Smith pulled out her phone and began to dial a number. "I'm going to call in a team to help us investigate," she said. "We'll need to work together to get to the bottom of this." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. We were finally making progress. We were finally going to get some answers. As we waited for the team to arrive, I couldn't help but think about my granddaughter. Where was she right now? Was she safe? And what was she involved in? I felt a surge of fear at the thought of her being in danger, and I knew that I had to do everything in my power to protect her. The doorbell rang, and I got up to answer it. It was the team that Miss Smith had called in, a group of serious-looking men and women who introduced themselves as agents with the FBI. They began to ask me questions, asking about my granddaughter's behavior and about the shell company. I answered as best I could, trying to remember every detail. As we talked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. What were we dealing with here? And how deep did it go? The agents listened attentively, their faces serious. When I finished speaking, they nodded and began to discuss their plan of action. I listened, feeling a sense of hope. We were finally going to get to the bottom of this. We were finally going to find out what was going on. As the agents left, Ms. Smith turned to me and smiled. "We'll get to the bottom of this," she said. "I promise." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude. "Thank you," I thought. "Thank you for helping me." But as I looked at Ms. Smith, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. What were we dealing with here? And how deep did it go? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. The doorbell rang again, and I got up to answer it. It was my granddaughter, standing on the porch with a look of defiance on her face. "I know what you're doing," she said. "I know you're trying to investigate me." I felt a surge of fear at this. What did she mean? And what did she know? "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to stay calm. But my granddaughter just shook her head. "You'll find out soon enough," she said. "You'll find out what's really going on." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving me feeling confused and scared. What was going on? And what did my granddaughter know? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. I watched as my granddaughter walked away, feeling a sense of unease wash over me. What did she mean by those words? And what was she involved in? I turned to Miss Smith, who was watching the scene unfold with a serious expression. "What just happened?" I asked her. Miss Smith shook her head. "I don't know, but I think we just got a glimpse of the manipulation that's been going on." I felt a surge of anger at this. Manipulation? What did that mean? And who was behind it? I thought back to the shell company and the mysterious phone calls. It was all starting to make sense. My granddaughter was in deep, and I was starting to realize just how deep. Miss Smith turned to me, her eyes serious. "We need to get to the bottom of this," she said. "We need to find out who is behind this and what their motives are." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. I was going to protect my granddaughter, no matter what. As we went back inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked around the room, but there was no one there. I turned to Miss Smith, who was watching me with a concerned expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the feeling that was growing inside of me. "I just feel like we're being watched," I said finally. Miss Smith's expression turned serious. "I think you might be right," she said. "I've been noticing some strange things too." I felt a surge of fear at this. What did she mean? And what strange things had she noticed? What kind of things? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Miss Smith hesitated, as if unsure of how to explain. "I've seen some suspicious people lurking around the neighborhood," she said finally. "And I've received some strange phone calls." I felt a chill run down my spine at this. Suspicious people? Strange phone calls? What was going on? I looked at Miss Smith, who was watching me with a serious expression. "I think we need to be careful," she said. "I think we need to watch our backs." I nodded, feeling a sense of agreement. We were in this together, and we were going to get to the bottom of it. As we sat down to discuss our next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked around the room, but there was no one there. I turned to Miss Smith, who was watching me with a concerned expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the feeling that was growing inside of me. "I just feel like we're getting close to the truth," I said finally. Miss Smith's expression turned serious. "I think you might be right," she said. "I think we're on the verge of uncovering something big." I felt a surge of excitement at this. We were getting close to the truth, and I was ready to find out what it was. As we continued to discuss our next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked around the room, but there was no one there. I turned to Miss Smith, who was watching me with a concerned expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the feeling that was growing inside of me. "I just feel like we're running out of time," I said finally. Miss Smith's expression turned serious. "I think you might be right," she said. "I think we need to move fast if we're going to uncover the truth." I nodded, feeling a sense of agreement. We were running out of time, and we needed to move fast. As we sat down to make a plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked around the room, but there was no one there. I turned to Miss Smith, who was watching me with a concerned expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the feeling that was growing inside of me. "I just feel like we're in over our heads," I said finally. Miss Smith's expression turned serious. "I think you might be right," she said. "I think we need to be careful if we're going to make it out of this alive." As we sat down to make a plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I looked around the room, but there was no one there. I turned to Miss Smith, who was watching me with a concerned expression. "What's wrong?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the feeling that was growing inside of me. "I just feel like we're in over our heads," I said finally. Miss Smith's expression turned serious. "I think you might be right," she said. "I think we need to be careful if we're going to make it out of this alive." Just then, there was a knock at the door. I got up to answer it, feeling a sense of trepidation. Who could it be? As I opened the door, I was shocked to see my granddaughter standing there, a look of defiance on her face. "I know what you're doing," she said. "I know you're trying to investigate me." I felt a surge of anger at this. How dare she? But then, something unexpected happened. Miss Smith stepped forward, a look of determination on her face. "We're not going to let you get away with this," she said. "We're going to expose you for what you are." My granddaughter sneered at her. "You'll never be able to stop me," she said. "I have too much power." But Miss Smith just smiled. "We'll see about that," she said. And with that, she pulled out a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. Suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of sirens. The police had arrived. My granddaughter's eyes widened in shock as the officers rushed in and surrounded her. "It's over," one of them said. "You're under arrest." As I watched my granddaughter being taken away, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Justice had been served. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the officers turned to me and handed me a small piece of paper. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a warrant for the arrest of the CEO of the shell company," he said. "It seems that your granddaughter was just a pawn in a much larger game." I felt a surge of anger at this. How could they have used my granddaughter like that? But then, something else unexpected happened. The officer turned to Ms. Smith and handed her a small device. "What's this?" she asked. "It's a recording device," he said. "It contains a recording of the CEO's confession. It seems that he was behind the whole thing, and he was using your granddaughter to get to you." I felt a sense of shock at this. How could they have been so ruthless? But then, something else unexpected happened. Ms. Smith turned to me and smiled. "It's over," she said. "We've finally brought them to justice." As I watched the officers take the CEO away, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Justice had been served. And as I turned to Ms. Smith, I felt a sense of gratitude. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for helping me." Ms. Smith smiled and hugged me. "You're welcome," she said. "We make a good team." As we hugged, I felt a sense of closure. The nightmare was finally over. And as we walked out of the house, I felt a sense of hope. The future was bright. But then, something unexpected happened. My granddaughter turned to me and apologized. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she said. "I was wrong to do what I did. Can you ever forgive me?" I felt a surge of emotion at this. My granddaughter was apologizing. And as I looked at her, I felt a sense of love. "Of course, I forgive you," I said. "I love you no matter what." As we hugged, I felt a sense of closure. The nightmare was finally over. And as we walked out of the house, I felt a sense of hope. The future was bright. The CEO of the shell company was sentenced to life in prison, and my granddaughter was given a second chance. She apologized to me and to the community, and she worked hard to make amends for her mistakes. And as for Ms. Smith, she was hailed as a hero. She had solved the case and brought the perpetrators to justice. As for me, I was finally able to find peace. The nightmare was over, and I was able to move on with my life. And as I looked back on the experience, I realized that it had taught me a valuable lesson. The power of forgiveness and the importance of standing up for what is right. I was grateful for the experience, and I knew that I would never forget it. The case was closed, and justice had been served.